much. Bye. Oh.
Did Brian tell
Brian
me?
might have to go.
Did Brian have to tell me last night? Yeah.
He's probably at a board of trustees meeting.
I think.
Oh, yes, he's in Chicago.
That was. Yeah.
Oh, you know what?
Interesting.
These guys aren't.
Yeah, for sure.
Joint board meeting with the Mahomet Seymour Board of Education in the Village of Mahomet. And I'd like to call this to order. It is 7:01 p.m. on Monday, January 29th. If you're a guest, I'd like to remind you to sign in. I'd like to remind everyone to silence cell phones. And I'd like to remind visitors that in order to facilitate an effective meeting, anyone who wishes to make public comments to the board, please read the visitor guidelines found on the table outside the door and complete the attached public participation form and get those to Jennifer, please, in the next couple of minutes. Jennifer, we have a roll call. Where are you? Jennifer, roll call.
Giles.
Here.
Rayburn.
Here.
Hendricks. Casson.
Here.
Larson. Here. Park. Here. McComb.
Here.
Widener.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Kohlrabi.
Here.
Herbst.
Here.
Johnson.
Yes, ma'am.
Lynn.
Here.
Metzger, and Oliver.
Very good. At this time, I'd like everyone to stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Board members, you've had an opportunity to look at the agenda for tonight's meeting. Does anyone like to make any changes proposed to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Larson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? School board members, in addition to the agenda tonight, you received a consent agenda. There's only one item on the consent agenda, and that's payment of bills. Is there anything you'd like removed for further discussion? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as it's presented?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Jennifer, can I have a roll call vote to approve the bills?
Park. Yes. Casson.
Yes.
Rayburn.
Yes.
Giles.
Yes.
Hendricks. Larson. Yes. McComb.
Yes, thank you. Jennifer, do we have any public participation forms? Okay, great. So now we're on to the main topic for tonight. This is a study session with the Village of Mahomet, and we'd like to thank you all for joining us over here tonight and being a part of this. This is a study we jointly commissioned with the school district and the village, and we're here to hear about that tonight, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Hall to introduce our speaker.
Okay, great, thank you. As President McComb said, a couple of months ago, the village and the school district, we were having some informal conversations about the amount of growth in our community and some new subdivisions and different housing developments that were taking place. And we thought that, we know that our community is growing, but we thought having some data and some actual statistical analysis of that would be something that's very helpful in terms of our long-term visioning and planning, both as separate taxing bodies, but also as we work together. So I think it's a great statement on our cooperative and collaborative relationship that we're here tonight, but also that we got together and retained the services of Cropper GIS and McKibben Demographics to do a demographic and enrollment study. And so tonight we have Dr. Jerry McKibben here from Cropper GIS, and he's here to provide an overview of his findings in our community and in our school district. So we welcome you. Coldest night in, I don't know, a century or something, and appreciate you being here tonight.
He has Minnesota plates on his car. I noticed when he came in. I thought they had him ready for the weather.
Yes, it is all for me. A little warm. Thank you all for coming out to the ball tonight. Thank you, Dr. Hall, members of the board, trustees. A couple things I'm going to get out of the way first. First off, don't be fooled by that Rock Hill, South Carolina thing on there. My wife took a job down there 15 years ago and insisted I move with her, so I went down also. I was born and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana. In fact, my dad's family is from Rockford, and I spent some of my formative years right here in the Champaign area. My dad worked for Magnavox when they were there. So, in Thomasboro out here and all over the place. My bachelor's degree is from St. Geneseo, New York, master's from Syracuse, doctorate in applied pneumatics from Bowling Green State University in Ohio. We've done about 4,000 school districts in the last 30 years across the country. This is going to be a fun presentation. I've done a lot of Midwest school districts. I get to finally do one in a vibrant, growing community, and I can't underscore how rare that is in the Midwest today. You really are in unique circumstances here. Technical note, these are forecasts. They are not projections. There's a difference. A projection is where you take a past trend for enrollment, usually it's year-to-year survivorship, second, third, fourth, over a period of time, usually 5 years, create an algorithm, and then the results of that, you project out in the future. Very simple, very easy, quick, up to about the mid-1990s, about all you had for enrollment forecasting. The problem with them are they're almost never correct, because as soon as it's happened over the last 5 years, will replicate itself over the next 10 or 15. These are forecasts, a two-step procedure, and this is where the village is interested. We do a full population forecast for the district. In this case, also the village of Mohammed and a 1.5-mile radius around the village and the balance of districts. The results of that population forecast then drives an enrollment forecast. So we'll walk through the methodology and the results on that. There's some very, very, very key findings. Our goal here is to have the forecast driven by your current and future demographic dynamics, not by your past trends. Now, anytime you're doing a forecast, you have to have assumptions. These are broad socioeconomic, demographic parameters, if you like, in which if the assumptions are not violated, we should stay within plus or minus 2% of the total district forecasted population over the 10 years. Nice. These are the confidence interval for you statistical people out there, okay? So I want to go through, you have the whole list in front of you. I want to go through the 3 key ones. I want to go through the other one. The most important one is number 2. Interest rates for 30-year fixed mortgage rate stays between 5 and 6%. Why is it so important? It dictates your housing market. Your housing market dictates your in-migration, not migration flows. And one of the great adages of this, before someone can move into Mohammed, they have to have a place to live, either an apartment or in a house. If you're gonna buy a house, you have to have a mortgage. If you can't get a mortgage, you're not going to move, okay? Now, a bit of a misnomer here. We've come off of historic lows of 30-year fixed rates. Last, almost 10 years now, pretty much 3.5%, 4%. Now back up to 5. It's a bit of a tipping point. So you will see a slight drag on this. Now, anytime you have a percentage in here, an assumption, it's a break point. If the 30-year fixed rate goes to 6%, maybe 6.1, stays there for a couple of months, drops back down, it's a slight drag in the forecast. If it goes up to 8%, 9%, stays there for a couple of years, it's like hitting a brick wall. You'll see a dramatic drop in the number of home sales and migrating households. And there's a generational problem here too. Those of us who are old enough to remember the 70s, 80s, 90s, into the 2000s, when the 30-year fix was 8, 10, 12%, 5 sounds pretty good, right? Kids today, we've seen nothing but 3, 3.5, and 4 over the last 10 years. 5 sounds like highway robbery, okay? And there's another factor at work here. You may have seen the article came out, I think it was November, where the average college graduate marries comes out with $39,000 in student loan debt. That's a lot of debt. Most of us didn't have that much when we came out of college. The problem is the average college graduate marries a college graduate. There's 80,000 household debt. That's why they're so susceptible to increases in the 30-year fixed rate. And unless it's an FHA loan, you're probably paying some kind of a 10 or 20% down payment. So if we see a large movement in the interest rates, it's going to have an inverse effect on your in-migration flow. The second one I want to point out is G, the unemployment rate. We assume it stays below 7% for the 10-year forecast. Now, this is for the Champaign, Urbana metropolitan area. Most of the people who live in Mohammed don't work in Mohammed. They work in the greater metropolitan area. So you have to look at the entire area's economy. Look at the entire area's demographic trends, because your main migration feeder is out of Champaign, Urbana. Okay, they're all interconnected. So if the unemployment rate, again, like it was 10 years ago, goes back up to 10, 11%, you're going to see a slowdown in migrating households. You gotta have a job before you buy a house. And the third one I want to point out, and probably the one that's most overlooked by people, is P, the housing turnover rate. And particularly here in Mohammed, and this is the voice of caution from your demographer. Everybody fixates on new home construction, either apartments, houses, whatever, okay? As we speak in the United States right now, 90% of the housing market's existing home sales. Only 10% is new home construction. Right now, you've had a bit of a building boom, so you're outside that norm. It's closer to the half right now over the last 3 years. But as you move forward and the building slows down, you're going to see a greater proportion of your housing market be existing home sales, okay? And that's going to be the true driver of your population change, okay? Now, this is hard to wrap your head around, and fortunately now we have 2 sources. We use Zillow and Realty Track for home sales. Hop on there, we buy their data. You can hop on, type in the address or in the city, and you can see what's for sale down to the parcel level, how long it's been on the market, how many have sold in the last 3 years. It's very, very complete and detailed information, which helps us in our forecasting. Has anybody here ever used Realty Track at all? Okay, I love Realty Track. We buy it, but you can type in your address, your little free promo comes up, and you can see who your friends and neighbors are behind on their mortgages. It's a great way to spice things up. So,
Great information on Realty.
absolutely, yeah. You won't be invited certified parties anymore after that, I can guarantee you. So once we set the assumptions, the first thing to do is discover what the demographic dynamics are for the areas under study. Here we have three: the village, the periphery, and the balance of the district. The most important factor in future population is not fertility. Get more on that later. It's not even migration. It's age structure. It's about almost half the explained variance future population. And the way we describe that is what we call the population pyramid. And this is where we get our first snapshot. Now it says 2010. Yes, everything's based on 2010 census data because you have to have a good base to, it's like balancing your checkbook. You have to have an opening balance. 2010 census is an opening balance. Why didn't we use the special census? Because the special census didn't cover the entire school district. We have to have the same base for all of our calculations. They're pretty easy to read, actually. That 0 to 4 bar, that's your preschoolers. 5 to 9 is elementary, 10 to 14 is middle, 15 to 19 is high school. 20 to 34 years old is what we refer to as family formation ages. 80% of all births occur to women between the ages of 20 and 34 years old. Despite what you've read in the popular press lately, fertility rates in this country haven't changed that much in the last 40 years. They've stayed in a nice tight 10% band between 1.8 and 2.0 children per woman in her lifetime. If you're wondering what a 0.8 kid looks like, go to Ohio State, they have a lot more than those. Says the guy that went bowling green.
I didn't catch that.
Buckeyes.
You'll have to pay me later. Guess I'm not.
You're not the one that signs the checks, are you? 35 to 54 years old are the ages where most people have kids in school, okay? So, now there's a few exceptions to that. I was one of them. I was a first-time father of 40. So I was 58 when my son graduated high school, and everybody told me what a nice, well-behaved grandson I had. But we were more the outliers than anything else. But the people who will come to the school board meetings who have kids in school, as a rule, are going to be between the ages of 35 and 54. 55 to 69 are what we refer to as the empty nest ages. And this is where it really starts befuddling people, is because the Smith family has lived in the house down the road here for 20 years. The problem is 10 years ago, there was 4 people in the household. Today, there's only 2. This is why we don't use the housing unit method to forecast population, because the housing unit method doesn't have an out-migration component. It assumes household size stays the same. It doesn't. Mohammed is suffering from what I refer to as the curse of the successful school district. What is the curse? Well, high test scores, great graduation rate, was it 82, 83% of your graduates go into post-secondary education? Very, very high rate, enviable. So they graduate, they go on to college, and they don't come back.
It's true.
Now, you'll hear stories of John and Mary that may have come back, they went with small town life and all that. They're the exception, not the rule. For every 2 high school seniors that leave the district that don't move back, you need 1 new household to move in just to replace their fertility, just to break even. Okay. Bless you, yeah. That usually causes sneezes anyway, but you have to look at both sides of the equation here. You can see from this population pyramid that the fastest growing household type in the district beyond 2010 is going to be empty nest households. We know that already. 70 and over are what we refer to as the turnover ages, all right? Now you'll see a slight uptick at 62, another one at 65 with retirement, but most people don't downsize their homes till they're in their 70s. It's not retirement that triggers downsizing, it's the death of one of the spouses. Then the house is too big, maintenance becomes an issue, can you drive, health issues and all that, then they'll put it on the market. So if I know age structure of the homeowners, and how many are over the age of 70, that's a good proxy measurement on how many households are going to go on the market in the next 10, 15, 20 years due to downsizing. And you can see here that clearly the number of households over 70 is going to be going up over the next 10, 15 years. But the number of ones empty nesting are going to be going up at a faster rate, okay? What this does is this sets your, we call your fundamental, your baseline forecast. And we call it dummy forecast. If no one moves in, no one moves out, what's going to happen given your own demographic devices? Once we establish that, then we can put in the other factors, home turnover, new home construction, apartment building, things like that. Because you'll notice here, notice how that 0 to 4 bar is smaller than the 5 to 9. So if you fast forward to 2015, those 0 to 4 are now 5 to 9. So left to your own demographic devices, your elementary enrollment should have dropped by about 100 students. Well, it didn't, it went up actually. But we now can tell, okay, what was the impact of the in-migrating households measured empirically. And I'll show you how we do that a couple slides later. But that's a caution for a district, particularly like Muhammad here, where you have a lot of new homes being built and a lot of people moving into existing homes. You instinctively want to add these kids to what you already have in enrollment, not realizing the cohorts coming in behind it are smaller. This hourglass, we call this the suburban pattern. You see this very common in suburban areas. Why is there so few 20-year-olds out here? You don't have apartments. Now you've built a lot of apartments, so you help address that problem with a more even distribution by age of population, but you still have far more people in your 50s and now 60s than you have in your 20s. You don't have enough women in prime childbearing age to maintain your enrollment at current level. You need that immigration to come in. And this tells us empirically where it is. Now we look at the 3 study areas, you'll notice that none of them look exactly like the district total. This is Muhammad, the town, okay? Bigger bubble in the 40s and now in the 50s, and a bigger deficit to 0 to 4. If you look at the surrounding 1.5-mile buffer, it's a much more even distribution of population. Still a concentration in the 50s, still a little bit of a deficit in the 20s and 0 to 4, but not nearly as heavy as you see in the city as a whole. And then for the balance of the district, it's almost like a pillar, okay? Much more even distribution of the population. Just happen to have a large number of high school males 8 years ago. I won't make any comments on that, but basically you have a much more even distribution. You'll see these big waves going in and out. So, and because most of the population of the district is in the city of Muhammad, that's basically pretty much your dominant factor for the district trends. One thing we have to do with this is put the kids back in the area that we're studying so we can then link up the demographic trends and phenomena with actual location of children. So this is what Crawford GIS did, and did the mapping for the area. This is for the elementary, and did for all your schools, Saginaw Elementary, Lincoln Trail, basically where they're located at. And it also helps us to put together yield factors for new construction. If a subdivision is built or apartments are built, once they're completed, we can see how many children are in there. And that's another point I should make here too. We refer to it in demography as housing tenure. It's a fancy term for owner versus renter, okay? But the dynamics of owner-occupied households and rental households are completely different. Okay. Owners tend to be older, tend to be wealthier because they're older. They tend to have completed their family formation and move an average every 9.5 years. Renters tend to be younger, for that poor, still having children or have very young children, and move an average every 18 months. It's a much more mobile population. And when we're looking at yields, there's 2 distinct numbers. There's kids per household and there's school-age kids per household. The 2 different numbers. Apartments tend to have a lot of preschool-age kids in them. So they may have an average of, say 1.5 child per household, but only about 0.3 school-age kids. Because the phenomenon here is most people don't want to raise their kids in an apartment. So when the oldest one gets to first or second grade, they're starting to look into moving into a single-family detached home. So you see some out-migration rollover there. Homeowners, as a rule, have finished their family formation. They may have some preschoolers, but the gap between the school-age kids and total number of kids per household is much, much narrower. So you see a full impact from that one. So the actual tenure of an area and the tenure of what you're building, how you're doing it, has a key impact on that. And this is how we come up with your yield factors. All of the variables on this are built specific to this area. We don't use national, state, regional, and county models. We use as much local data as possible. This is live attend analysis showing where in the school district the elementary, junior high, and high school students live, and it's a pretty even distribution. You've done a good placement on your schools. Should keep your transportation down, minimal cost as well. Looking at the household characteristics, this is one people will find very surprising. Only about 40% of the households in the school district have under 18 population in it. Now, of course, it's higher in Muhammad and you see in the other areas, but most of the households in the district don't have kids in them. Okay? And that's because you've got such a large number of empty nesters. Yeah, you're moving in a lot of young families, no doubt about that. But we call the indigenous local population is much, much older. Average household size around about 2.7. Real crude measurement here is mom, dad, whatever the point is kids. Okay, so see if minute changes between the three areas on that one. Households 35 to 54, about 45%, and that's going up. The good news is you have about 18% increasing households over 65, which means you'll have an increasing number of households turning over in the next probably 10 years. So that will give you a good foundation of home sales when they stop building, which they will do. And of course, 80% homeowner, that number is probably down to about 76% now of the apartments you build, but it's still better than 3-to-1 homeowner over renter. So it's still pretty much a dominant area. Most suburban areas don't have a whole lot of rental units in them. You guys, again, are more the exception on that one, and you built some, which is actually to your benefit because it's going to help even out that age distribution substantially. Single-person households, about 18%, and about 7% are single and over 65. This is where the spouse has probably already died, so it's a short-term measurement on households that are going on the market in the next at least 3 or 4 years. This is my favorite data from 2010 census. This is the individual year of age. And what we're doing here is twofold. We use this to measure the impact of your in-migration, and we also look at something called the cohort effect. Okay. And you also see here, it's in 2010, the 5-year-olds, that was your kindergarten population. 6-year-olds are first grade, 7 is second, 8 is third. But by 2015, the under 1 population is kindergarten. 1-year-old's first grade, 2 is second, 3 is third. Everybody's aged forward 5 years. Now notice the district total. The 5 and older cohorts were way above 200, 250, 240, 247 in there, where the under 1 to 4 are 147, 187, things like that. So you see the size of smaller cohorts coming in. That tells us how much deficit in the preschool you had to make up by year just to break even. And at the district level, we have an example here called the market share. It's a little hard to read, but 2014, a 1-year-old, and 2010 as a kindergartner, that's at to 21, 118%. And then you can track it through time. In 2015, they're first graders, 16 they're second, 17 they're third, 18 they're now fourth graders. We can track that cohort through time. You see it goes from 118% to by 2018 it's up to 136. This is the 1-year-old population. So we're seeing a almost 20 percentage point increase in the size of that cohort. And if the percentages are going up, you've had in-migration. If the percentages are going down, you've had out-migration. Okay? And this is how we develop our age-specific migration models, because it's been my experience that when a third grader moves, they usually take the whole family with them. You could make that leap of logic that, okay, this is a proxy for household migration. If a third grader has moved, they usually don't do it independently. And you'll notice in all of the age groups, you're seeing an increase in these percentages over time, a strong, sustained in-migration flow. We can compare that number to existing homes being sold, new homes being built, new apartments being built and occupied, and compare that to by year, and then build an age-specific migration model on it. And that's how we drive it, okay? So it hence the parameters of if this building continues at X rate, everything that's currently on the books, planned, and approved, comes to fruition, this is what it's going to do for your population, okay? Providing we don't go into a recession and we don't see the 30-year fixed rate go up 6%. Okay. Now I'll tell you right now, full disclosure, if we go into we're going to be in a recession this time next year anyway. That's pretty much a given right now. Or it's going to be much, much milder than 08, 09 was. But more concerned, if the 30-year fixed rate drives north of 6%, and we're looking at 6.5% this time next year, my forecast will be too high. I will tell you that right now. I will tell people, I am a demographer, I am not a soothsayer. If I could actually see the future, I wouldn't be doing this for a living. I would be retired of my stock market killings years ago. But that's the key parameter, and that's the variable you should pay the most attention to. Construction rates, home sale rates, and what's the 30-year fix doing? And if it gets above 6%, it's going to be a drag on your in-migration. Fewer people are going to be able to get mortgages to fortify those houses. And you need an in-migration flow. Because reiterate again, you don't have enough local indigenous births to maintain your enrollment at current levels. And the reason why you don't have enough women in prime childbearing age. And you've addressed that problem with the apartments. You've raised your 20 to 34-year-old population. It's helped the situation, but it's not enough to correct that situation totally. All this information goes into a population forecast. This is the one for the district total, there's one for each of the 3 areas. Now there's 2 ways to read this. You can look at an age group over time. Let's take 5 to 9 since that's your elementary. So, my glasses on here so I can read it. So 5 to 9, 2010s, 1142, goes to 12, 20, and 15, up to 1300 in 2020. 1390 in 2025, and then kind of levels off to 1360 in 2030. Okay, so that's basically to tell us what your elementary enrollment is going to do. That's your base population. Or you can read a cohort through time. 0 to 4 in 2010 are 5 to 9 and 15, 10 to 14-year-olds in 20, 15 to 19-year-olds in 25, and 20 to 24-year-olds in 2030. Follow them diagonally. Your big in-migration flows into the district are people between the ages of 25 and 44 years old and 0 to 9, bring their children with them. Your 2 biggest out-migration flows are 18 to 22-year-olds and people over the age of 70. That's why you see that big drop from 15, 19 to 2024. Those are your college kids going off college. Now, technically, you're supposed to, if you go to college, you're supposed to be counted, and you are counted where you go to school at. My son went to Wisconsin, so he was still up there we ever sent this form to South Carolina, we put my wife and I down, he lives someplace else. Most parents, however, they're sitting there writing, tuition checks, going, the kid lives here, puts them down also. So college students are the most double counted population in any government statistic, and you have to be wary of that. In reality, a lot of people don't actually live in the district, they're not here to contribute to your future demographics. The columns on the bottom, well, I should take that back here a second. Along the bottom, you see median age, 37.9, going up to 38.9 years old. That's the age where half the population is older and half is younger. Even with a very healthy immigration flow of young households and families, your median age is still going up. And the closer you get to 40, the tougher it is for you to keep your enrollment going up because you have an older population. The center columns at the bottom, birth, death, natural increase, net migration, and change. I will call those the components of change for the 5-year period, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 25, 25 to 30. You'll notice that the deaths stay pretty, the births stay pretty flat in the mid-70s, 700 range. In-migrating households help with that. You'll notice that deaths go up rather precipitously from 440 to 610. That's not due to any plague or anything in town. It's just you got more people what we call prime dying age. I don't get to find a better term than that, but I used to call prime dying age even over the age of 60, but now that I'm 63, it's maybe over the age of 80. So that's why that's happening. Now, net migration, 190, 270, 310, 260. The first thing people will always say is, oh, there's more than 270 people moving in here between 15 and 20. You're right, there are. It's net migration. Number of people moving in minus the number of people moving out. You gotta look at both sides of the equation on this one. So you've got, over a 5-year period, you got probably about 2,200 people moving in, get 2,000 moving out. So, and what really befuddles people on that is in many cases, those people moving out don't leave an empty housing unit. They leave a smaller housing unit because mom and dad are still there. So they're going from that 4 to 2. So you don't really see a lot of the out migration until the household's gone, some new family moves in. So the results of this population forecast then drives the enrollment forecast. Okay. Now, this is where the cohort effect comes home to roost. And for this, I have to explain, I have an analogy for how cohorts work. And the analogy I use is a bucket of water. If I have a bucket of water, and I'm pouring water in the top, and there's a hole in the bottom, as long as I'm pouring in the top, faster it's going out the bottom, the level will rise, right? But if for some reason the hole in the bottom gets bigger, and it's now going out faster than I'm pouring in, level will drop, even if I'm pouring at the same rate. Enrollment works the same way. Okay? What's the size of the K1 cohorts coming in? What's the size of the 12th grade cohorts going out? And you'll notice that over the last 5 years for the district, you're averaging about 240 12th grade seniors going out. You get beyond 2023, and it's going to be about 270. Okay, that's why your enrollment growth is slowing down. You'll notice I don't have the K and 1 enrollment dropping at all. The reason why you see a slowdown in the overall enrollment growth is because you have the hole in the bottom of the bucket getting bigger, and it's going to start running out. And you've got a rather substantial wave coming through. So the district adds about 500 students over the next 10 years. Now think about this for a second. This is a district that has a 100 student deficit. And there's 0 to 4 to 5 to 9. Make that up and add another 500 on top of that. That's a healthy in-migration flow. Very, very healthy in-migration flow. In fact, most of I was just in a district last night, bigger than this one, with the same phenomenon. they're built out, and their enrollment's dropping now, not because it's a bad place to live, they just don't have enough in-migration now, enough existing home sales to make up for the deficit. And the smaller cohorts are coming through and the enrollment's starting to drop. So, but you will have a wave going through your district in your enrollment, which is why you start seeing your elementary enrollment decline slightly in 2024. You get those bigger cohorts going in intermediate and middle school. In fact, the level that has the highest amount of growth is your middle school and your high school, as that wave goes through. Because you've got some relatively small 12th grade cohorts coming out the next couple of years, and a couple of relatively small 8th grade cohorts going out middle school. So you're going to see that wave effect as it goes through. So it looks like at the district level, we're kind of flattening out, not much is happening. But within the different levels of the school, elementary, middle, high school, intermediate, there's a lot of different dynamic of wave going through. And that will cause probably some pressure on your facilities as well. Now, this is all predicated in the fact that if it's planned, platted, and approved, they build it, okay? Goes on the market, they sell it, people move in, all right? The economy in Champaign-Urbana stays relatively good, okay? You need that flow coming out. You need those new young households. You need going into the apartments, you need going into starter homes, and going into move-up homes. As long as that flow stays within the parameters, we're about 90% confident that by 2028, your total enrollment will be 3,609 students plus or minus 72. That's 2% confidence interval band. But as I say, it's, if the economy goes south, the interest rates go north, I'm going to be too high. The probability of error, and that's one thing we have to study on this too, is what's the probability of being wrong on this. If I'm wrong, I'm too high, because the probability of error to the downside is much, much greater than the upside. And the economy won't overheat, boom, they can't build fast enough, you can't get enough empty nesters to move out fast enough to cause a lot of errors at the high side. You might even want to think of this as somewhat of a best case scenario. So when I call up Dr. Hall next fall and get your fall enrollment numbers and do first evaluation of the forecast results, you get 3 of them the first 3 years, which is not a recalculation. I had someone asked me that this week. No. We'll check and see if we're in parameters and see how we're doing compared to what your socioeconomic demographic assumptions you're doing. We did it for all of our school districts. So, 40 minutes, that's short for me, so. If those old professors going, you just can't shut them up.
You mentioned that pretty certain of a recession by this time next year.
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Geez. Let me count the ways. Who haven't we ticked off in a trade war? The impact of the tax cuts that brought all the money home, the stock buybacks propped up the stock market, that's going away. They've realized that most of the cut in or increase in employment has been low-wage jobs. Debt levels for households are at levels almost back to 2009. Manufacturing is down. Home sales have slowed down. Home constructions have slowed down. Pretty much every indicator out there is pointing south right now. And unless something happens in the next 3 months to convince me and, what are the people, Jamie Dimon on down, it's not going to, we're going to be in a recession. Now, the big thing is people hear the word recession, first thing they think of course, is 08 and 09. It won't be that bad. Yes, I hope it won't be that bad unless they've been doing something with the corporate debt that we don't know about, like they did with the subprimes last time, and really dropped the bottom out. But now we've been on false legs here for a couple of years now. I think the biggest reason is the debt levels just can't be sustained. It's an artificial high. And it's just the same thing we heard in 07, it's going to go on forever. all the houses are gonna be sold, we'll never see poverty again, you know. I'm sorry, I've been around too long to believe that nonsense anymore. I'm surprised we've made it this far. So it will slow down, it's just a question of how bad it's gonna be. And I don't know how much skullduggery is going on in the Fed right now, so. Sir?
So, in your opinion, for sustained growth,
Mm-hmm.
is it better to encourage new homes, apartments, or encourage commercial growth?
Well, it depends on what your focus is. If you're looking for enrollment, of course you want, okay. If you're looking for long-term sustained population growth, the whole population, commercial is probably better. But again, you have a natural advantage. You're only 10 miles away from a metropolitan area, which is always going to be your main migration feeder. It's the push-pull theory of migration. Okay, there's the pull, the joys of living in Muhammad. There's the push, want to get out of Champaign-Urbana. Okay, as long as that persists, you're going to have people that are going to want to move out here. The rest of the suburban area really can't handle that much. You're the biggest of the suburban areas. Rantoul's a little too far away, not that easy to drive to, and not a whole lot of housing up there either. So, for the commercial side, well, it's always good. It's good for your tax base, but one thing we've noticed when we started, doing forecasts for economic development, if you get 20 or 30% of the people who come to say you put a plant here of 100 people, you only get about 3 live in town. You only get about 20-30% of the people living in your actual school district, your municipality. It's more of a regional impact, particularly if you're hiring local labor. And most companies do that because they don't want to move in workers, it's expensive. So you put a 100-person plant here, they're going to come from all over the area. So on that aspect, it's a positive, but anything that comes to the metropolitan area is going to be a benefit for you economically. But for your tax base, you want to have it here. So it depends on what your focus is.
Jerry, you obviously see a lot of different districts or nationwide. You mentioned too that we're unique in our demographics or patterns. Can you speak to a little bit of how we do compare, what we're seeing as far as trending and kind of maybe what we're doing right or maybe what we need to avoid? And learn from folks maybe who are going the wrong way on some parameters.
Well, you've got kind of unique opportunities in front of you when you're exercising that. 75% of all school districts in the United States will lose enrollment in the next 10 years because it's aging, okay? And since there's no magic elixir out there to get old, you have to bring in young people, okay? And that's what you're doing. The problem that most small towns do, and because of quality of life issues, they don't like apartment dwellers. Apartment dwellers and homeowners just don't like each other. Okay, part of it's age, part of it's income, whatever the case may be, but you need both. Okay, apartment. You don't come out of college and buy a house. You come out of college and rent an apartment. That's where you start your family. And in suburban areas like this that don't have apartments, we call family formation areas, are then dependent upon whatever their migration sending area is for them to move out. And they have to be at an economic situation like where they can afford to buy a house, okay? Most people who rent apartments about here, when they go to buy a house, will stay in the district. This is not their home, their community. They look for something in the area. They're more likely, man, I can't afford a new one. I'll take an existing one though, as more of those come on the market. So that's good, is the fact that you've got this better mix of homes. The analogy I was using last night about people always wanting to build single-family attached homes. Say a developer comes in, wants to build 400 homes, 5-year build-out span. Everybody just lives. And out of the goodness of their heart, gives you 15 acres of land to build a school. Okay, 99.9% of the time, that's the worst place to build it. A lot of them down in Georgia did this. Okay, and of course, they're giving you the land for the school because they want to sell these 400 homes. So they build a school, fill it up with a subdivision. The problem is 15 years later, you can't get a busload of kids out of that subdivision because they all moved in about age, 28 to 38 years old. And there's 8 kids left in the subdivision. They're in middle school and high school. There's very, very few elementary kids. So now have a tendency to look at the country of Chile, trying to get enough territory and kids in there. That's why one of the reasons you don't have just single-family attached homes, because they'll all move in and they'll all age out at the same time. You'll see this huge, huge bubble of population in their 40s and 50s. And let's expand our definition of empty nester for a second. Traditionally, it's when the last kid graduates high school, right? Okay. But you could be an empty nester of preschool and elementary, preschool, elementary, and middle. There's a lot of housing units in Muhammad that have kids in school, that have middle schoolers and high schoolers. There are not any elementary kids there. There's no preschoolers. There's sure not going to be any more kids. Okay. I used my dad's house back in Indiana as an example. At one point, we sent 4 kids to North Salem County Schools. Hasn't been a school-age kid come out of there since 1976. Won't be till my dad sells the house, moves away, and new family moves in. If you're in a house for 40 years, you get 2 kids 2 years apart, more than half the time you're there, you don't have school-age kids. Okay. How many people here have children? You all live in the district, right? Okay, how many are gonna have any more? You get your work cut out for you, gentlemen, so that's a heavy load to carry. That's not enough, you know. And that's the variable to forget about is time, okay? They've moved in, it's always going to be this way. We're going to get older. In this forecast here, every child in this district right now, grade 3 and higher, is gone by 2028. That's a whole new generation coming in, probably a whole new different households. So the greater mix you've got, the better you're going to have, okay? So having both is good. The problem is just don't throw right next to each other. It's a war all the time. They just don't like each other. It's kind of like these people that we're going to build housing, we're going to put young families and elderly together. Stupidest thing I've ever heard of. I mean, you know, you're either going to have young families in there or you're going to have over 55s. You're not going to have both, folks. I'll tell you that right now. And developers just won't learn that lesson. We're old, we're grouchy, we're cracky, we don't want kids running around the neighborhood and all that stuff. Just leave us be. Put us someplace else. Yes, sir.
Assumption F. Assumption F.
Yeah.
How often have you seen that actually work? And then I've got the same question for you village folks. Historically, have we seen that happen here where everything that's platted actually gets built out in 10 years?
Well, I'll tell you, that's the reason why I have it in there is people always say, oh, of course they're going to be built. You know, and then 09 came along and there's a whole bunch of houses out there that, you know, were supposed to be planned, improving and built, and didn't ever, they're pipe fields still. You know, now by 10 years, usually they're built. Okay, but the whole point there is time of the build out scenario. The example I mentioned before, 400 housing units. No one's going to drop 400 housing units in a year. More than likely, it's more of a 10-year build out in the 5 I set. But over a 10-year period, if it's planned, approved right now, I mean, it's probably got a better than average chance of being built. What's not in here is we're planning on, we're thinking about, we might want to, or looking into. They're not in the forecast, okay? If it's not planned, approved, there's no chance I can guarantee they'll be within 10 years. If they are at that point though, I'd say, I don't know, gentlemen, 90%, maybe 95. It takes something really devastating for it to not be built at all in a 10-year period.
I can speak just from coming on plan zoning and what phases, you know, I was involved with, and now it was 10 years ago. So, yes, I mean, in my opinion, but I think there's a differentiation, you know, between you're talking about planned, platted, approved.
Right.
It's probably different than what you think about open space and what's available, right? Is that
Right.
a fair assessment?
I would say so, yeah.
I think from what we platted, it gets
So
built.
platted, planned, platted, and approved, you mean lots that are ready to sell?
Up to the point where they can go ahead and start putting infrastructure in.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we have 90 homes platted right now, that's it, 90 lots platted. Now, coming on next year, after the next infrastructure season of the spring and summer, I don't know, Abby, probably another 40, 30 maybe. You know, we don't get this large number every year that are ready to sell. So yeah, within 10 years, but if you think about all the future phases, like somebody buys up the land and has future phases planned out, they certainly can. We've got subdivisions, we were talking about this earlier today, that are 15 years into it and they're still not, well, they're probably done in 15, 20 years, totally done.
The recession in '09 definitely slowed all that down.
Yeah.
But we are certainly caught up.
Yeah, you guys have. A large, again, this goes back to my key point, you guys are the outliers, you know. There's still places that still have pipe fields in them, you know, and they were pie in the sky type assumptions, and it's not gonna come to fruition. And those, you kind of take those off the book, they maybe plan approved, they're no longer active. You know, if we take those off the book, everything you got here is active.
Yeah.
Jared, I think you said it before, maybe in discussion or in this, but certainly with our migration statistics, if we build it, I mean, they'll come basically, is what we're seeing as far as that flex, so.
The point on that though, I want to reiterate, and it's kind of lost in discussion, is your building will slow down, no doubt about it, okay? For a host of reasons, recession, financing was against it. One thing I know for sure is a growing proportion of your housing market in the next 10 years will be existing home sales, okay? And just because your house building is slowing down doesn't mean you're going to see a subsequent slowdown in existing home sales. And that's the variable I would keep an eye on, because if that does slow down, and existing houses tend to be cheaper than new homes for a host of reasons, age not being the least of them. But if you're having a hard time scraping up the down payment money, a lot easier to get a mortgage for 190 existing home than it is a 290 new home or 350 new home. So they'll start gravitating towards that. And also, everybody's going to be 10 years older 10 years from now. The peak of the baby boom will then be 80. The front of the baby boom will be 83 at that point. Peak will be 73. You're going to see a large proportion of your population be in their 70s. Now, staying in their homes longer, no doubt, but we're going to die eventually, you know, and those houses are going to go on the market.
I mean, our numbers, and I'm going off of memory here, so 2 years ago, 90 or so single family, multifamily being duplex type thing, 0 lot lines included in that, about 90 last year. I think we were in the 60s. Part of that was because we had no 0 lot lines that were really popular, 0 lot line homes that were very popular. This year we're 52, 53 at the close of 2018. So we've seen a slowdown in terms of that. Now where that levels off, I think the next 2 years will tell, but our lowest in the last few years was 40-ish, 40 range in 09, the last big recession. We still were around 40 lots.
The number dropped because we didn't have enough lots.
Yeah,
right.
That was part
And
of it.
that's a key point. Here's the housing market made simple. Economists hate this, but it's true, okay? Take an area, we'll just take Muhammad Seymour, okay? Over 70 is your sellers, right? Okay. I'm on camera, so I have to go back here now. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Okay. Over 70 is your sellers, right? 25 to 40 is your buyers. Clearly, you've got more people wanting to buy in the area than you've got sellers. The difference must be made up with new construction. There's always to do it. That's true. Supply and demand. Now, flash forward 20 years here. This is the 800-pound demographic gorilla that's going to be the main factor beyond 2030. Those people in 50, 54 are going to be in their 70s. For the first time in this country's history, you're going to have more people in selling ages than you've got in buying ages. We've already got 800 counties in this country with more deaths than births, We already got 4 states with more deaths than births, and it's devastating their housing market. They've never seen this before. You've got all of these people in their 60s, 70s, 80s trying to downsize homes. No one there to buy them. Want a great example? Go to Buffalo, New York. Okay, you can get a nice 3,000 square foot, 2-story frame house on a 1/3 acre land, nice house, nice neighborhood, $40,000, and they can't move them because there's no buyers. You know, equity in house went through the floor. Okay, and we saw a little bit in the worst case what happened in Detroit, but you're seeing it all over, particularly in the rural areas, which are fast aging. Areas where their median age is above 50, that's a tipping point not only for declining births, it's also declining house market. Arthur County, Nebraska, one of my favorite ones, out in the middle of nowhere. A couple of years back, they had 25 deaths, 1 birth. They also had about 4 home sales too. Hardly any equity out there. That's why age structure is so important. That's what's going to dictate it, and that's why I know as you go through time, because that 50-54 bubble in 2020 and 2010 is going to be 60-64 in 2020 if they're still here. 23, they're 70-74, they're going to start selling. Okay, and you can see this in the micro level, so that's why it's going to become a more important factor as existing home sales. Right now, you need to build because the inflow demand is much higher than what's available. It's not going to stay that way forever, folks.
But there couldn't have been a real big shock, could it? I mean, knowing the tremendous size of the baby boom population.
I'll never underestimate the stupidity of the general population of demographics. I mean, you know, these are the same people that thought Social Security would be self-funded all the way through. I mean,
That's true.
I mean, I rest my case.
And that they were gonna save the world.
Well, you know, when you want an example of dumb, just go to the federal government, just cut their chase, you know, so they get that screwed up. So, underfunded pension plans, whole 9 yards, but, people, well, it'll never happen to us, you know, and until it does happen to you, they don't know anything about it. And, places where, and this is a key point too, because after Social Security, equity in one's home was traditionally the second largest source of retirement income. So, like my dad first bought his house in Indiana for like I think $17,000 we paid for it. It's listed like $190 now. You know, wow, that's like a 1,000% increase. We're not going to see 1,000% increase in equity of our homes. You know. And my son's generation is going, we're not going to buy houses. I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't want to spend my entire weekend working on the house like you do, you know. So it's just a whole different dynamic out there. And we're seeing suburbanization collapse back in. It's no longer sprawling out in most parts of the country. And the outer, what they call ex-urban areas are just getting pounded and punished because no one's moving out there in their old age now. Quick, they're becoming more like rural farm areas. I'm great at cocktail parties too, I'll tell you.
Maybe I know the answer to this, but I mean, is if we had a period of really stopping the growth and no growth,
Mm-hmm.
those of us who own homes, that's bad for us? Are we gonna see our value of our homes go down because there's nobody moving in to buy them?
The demand's dropping, you would think, yeah.
Demand will drop eventually, yeah, but you can probably still get out if it gets good. So. The one thing we have a shortage of in this country, this is why people are staying in their homes longer. Used to be we started seeing move out to 72, 73, now we're seeing 74 at 5 and 6. And the reason for that is we have an absolute, almost chronic shortage of elder housing in this country.
Yeah.
Downsizing only moves if it's someplace smaller, less maintenance, and cheaper. And we just don't have it. Only 8% go to assisted living centers, only 9% snowbird down to the south. And I can tell you, the south is not that much cheaper than the Midwest anymore now. The prices have really come up. So most people, when they move to downsize, want to stay in their home community. They move less than 50 miles. Problem is, there's just no place for them to move to. They don't want to move in with their kids because they'll kill each other, you know. They want someplace that can maintain their independence, still stay part of their community, they just don't have it. So a lot of small towns, you're seeing it, Des Moines, Terre Haute, Burlington, Vermont, another one, where they're building elder housing, elder-friendly housing. And what it's doing is allowing existing homes to go on the market and meet their housing demand, okay? It's a pretty bold move to do that. You'd probably have to have it done like Champaign or Urbana here for more transportation, closer to healthcare, retail services and the like. But when we talk about, their health breaks down, as people downsizing their homes, you down to brass tacks, one of the big issues is not so much the health breaking down, but they can't drive. You can't drive a car around here, you get a problem, okay? You've got to go to a more urban core type area. And that will force you to downsize probably even quicker than health problems, so.
So based on other studies you've done for other communities, do you see Mahomet Seymour as an average, above average as far as growth? And
Above average, far above average. Most of your contemporary small town, most medium-sized cities and towns in the Midwest would kill for your problems. They're just, you got population inflow, pretty good sustained local industry, got a decent restaurant downtown, that always helps. You have donut shops, which are missing, so. Huh? No, that'll kill your growth immediately. Starbucks is a known agent to reduce your fertility rate, so.
Somebody needs a $6.
Too lucky to limit. This is on the Family Channel, so no, you guys are doing really in a very, very enviable position. Interstate highway exit, get 2 exits, it just doesn't get any better than this. Your problem is going to be more managing and controlling it. You don't want sprawl, you don't want to lose quality of life, you don't want to grow too fast, but you don't want to shut off the flow either. You want to keep it nice, controlled, measured, balanced, and you're addressing your main problem by evening out your age cohorts. You don't want these big dips and flows. That's where you start getting this wild gyrations and variations in your not only demographic trends but also economic, housing, social, and the like. So, no, you're in a good position.
I'm glad you brought that up. I think that when we went into this discussion, it wasn't just a demographic study for the school district, and I think that's why we looked at that 1.5 mile buffer. You tell me if I'm wrong on the assessment, but for some stuff that we have put in place as far as policies or direction that we've given as far as how we're controlling growth, it looks like our forecasts within that 1.5 mile is we're not sprawling. We've got a lot of infill within our corporate boundary versus the 1.5 mile. Is that true?
Right. It is well controlled. I'm sure some would argue it could be a little tighter. We can always make that argument, but I've seen far worse. Projects we do down south where they consider planning one step close to communism. It's just all over the damn place. And there's a set rule in Darwin planning, and it's called the J curve. Infrastructure improvement always lags population growth. It has to, by its very nature. And the faster the population grows, the bigger the lag, and it gets to a point where it kind of breaks down, and the infrastructure improvements are starting to go down because you just can't keep up with maintenance, let alone build new. So the fact that controlled, measured growth makes it a lot easier to keep your infrastructure demands, and that includes education as well, not just roads and sewer and water. All of your social infrastructure, keep that gap as tight as possible. That's really good for quality of life issues as well. So Southerners just haven't quite grasped that point yet. They think that planning is something imposed upon them by the Yankees, but they'll learn eventually, maybe. So yeah, I think you guys' plan is probably pretty solid right now. Maybe a few tweaks here and there and preferences. I will say your planned development on the far south side probably gonna come in a little slower than the other ones, just because you have to drive the transportation question to it. Because commute to work is one of the issues people tend to overlook. And you have to remember that most households now have 2 workers. You have not just a commute to work, you have 2 commute to work, okay? So depends on where each worker's going to. So this side of town and the north, much better suited geographically and infrastructure for a commute into Champaign than the south side of town. So if you're going to put development down there, that would be more for people who would like probably stay more in the area and not have to make that commute every day. So more of a targeting type planning on that one. And that's getting kind of finite, so even at that level, that's what your problems, you do pretty good.
So can I ask you, based on essentially the numbers you've seen, being, what we know Muhammad is sort of a bedroom community, at what point, do you see any concerns on there being, as residential continues to grow, that means more bodies into the school district. Do you see any concerns on that at some point it doesn't work for the school district because, their bodies coming in while the tax dollars are not coming in because those tax dollars are getting eaten up by a child?
No, I think your problem's not going to be much that because the bodies are coming in, the bodies are also going out, they're graduating out. You'll have more and more kids going out. The in and out flow is not going to be growing that big. It's not bursting at the seams type growth like you'll see in some areas. Your problem for the school district is going to be most of your households don't have school-age kids in them. When you're outnumbered 2 to 1 on a bond issue right off the top, that's when it starts getting tough. So, because you have to go for any kind of funding issues, you got to go to by its very nature, hostile public that doesn't have kids in school. So your enrollment doesn't go up that much because you're bringing them in at just about the proper rate just to replace your outflow. So you're pretty much, you see in the forecast, you're not going up that much and you're really slowing down by 25. Those big cohorts start going out. So I don't see that so much as a problem, but more as the age structure of your resident population. Clear as mud. Other questions?
Well, thank you.
My pleasure, sir. Indeed.
Thank you very much.
It's nice to do a fun one for a change.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Two shows night.
Be here all week.
Officer or enlisted?
He worked for home.
I was in the Navy, enlisted.
All right.
Well, I guess maybe, hey, watch it.
For that one, I will see.
Watch it. Hey, we got the gavel there.
Well, what is this rig? Huh? What do you do? Huh? Major general.
Enrollment numbers that.
Really? Yeah.
Wow,
I've been 40 years.
Before they move on the agenda, I'll just say that, this is a great example of, again, Dr. Hall mentioned collaboration, and these efforts are not going to stop with one thing. These are ongoing discussions. We feed on each other, we're successful together. I think that's proof we've shown in the past, but it's not going to change in the future. So thank you so much, and look forward to a successful future.
Thank you all for being here tonight. In just a minute, the Board of Ed is going to go into closed session for one brief issue, which has to do with the employment compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of a specific employee of the public body, including testimony on a complaint lodged against the employee to determine its validity. Is there a motion for someone in the Board of Ed to go into closed session for that reason? Was that a motion from? Or was that just a smart remark? Okay, is there a second? Thank you. Any further discussion on that? Can I have a roll call vote on our side, please?
Park? Yes. Castle?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Giles?
Yeah.
Yes.
McComb?
Yes, we're gonna take a 10-minute recess. Thanks to the village for being here. For those that are here.